Okay, good morning and welcome to the latest construction question time with Brandon Silver, where he attempts to answer commonly asked questions in a construction sense. Good morning, Brandon.
Morning, Julie. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Sunny with you, I hope?
Yeah, not too bad. Yeah, not raining at least. Always a positive.
That's always a plus. Okay, so today's question that you're going to be answering for us is, when is practical completion achieved and what is the effect of achieving practical completion?
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about practical completion today. Now, unfortunately, there is no precise legal definition of practical completion. However, having said that, there is guidance from legal authorities, specifically case law. So today I'm going to talk about one specific case, that being Mears Limited versus Cost Plan Services, Plymouth and J.R. Pickstock Limited. Now, this case provided that in order for practical completion to be achieved, the works in question must be complete and free from defects, save for defects that are considered minor in nature. Now, this represents a high bar that must be achieved for practical completion to be certified. And in addition to significant defects, if there are numerous patent defects, then they cannot be considered as minor in nature. And in those scenarios, practical completion would not be certified. Now, as I've mentioned in a previous vlog of mine, patent defects are defects that are discoverable upon reasonable inspection. The other defects are latent defects, and latent defects are defects that are not discoverable upon reasonable inspection. And latent defects would not have any problem in certifying practical completion, because you'd certify practical completion, you wouldn't be aware of latent defects until later, because obviously by nature of the definition, they are not discoverable upon reasonable inspection. So that's actual practical completion. The other term that is important for me to discuss with you is deemed practical completion. Now, these are two different scenarios. Now, under clause 2.33 to 2.37 of the JCT standard building contract, if the contractor consents and the employer takes partial possession of a part of the works, then that relevant part, will be deemed practically complete. Now, this is notwithstanding the fact that there may actually be significant defects in that part of the works. So although it would not, under the definition which I've just gone over with you, the works be deemed as, wouldn't actually be certified as actually practically complete, they would be deemed practically complete. Now, although there is this difference between deemed practical completion and actual practical completion, the effect is the same. And this is the important thing. The effect of achieving actual practical completion, or the works being deemed as actually practically complete, has the same effect. And I'm now going to discuss with you those four effects. The first effect is that once the works have been deemed practically complete or actually achieve practical completion, this will be when half of the retention is released. Now, the retention, of course, is an amount retained from payments due to the contractor to ensure they complete the works. So because now the works have either deemed practically complete or actually practically complete, then they will get half of that retention released. The other half of retention will be released once the defects liability is passed and any defects have been completed. And this moves me nicely on to the second effect of achieving practical completion. And that second effect is that it signifies the beginning of the defects liability period, where under this period, the contractor is liable to rectify any damages. And this is known as the rectification period. So it would begin following practical completion. The third, and probably the most important effect, is that of achieving practical completion, whether deemed or actual, is that it ends the contractor's liability for liquidated damages. And I actually talked about this in a previous vlog, which hopefully you'll remember. And liquidated damages are damages that the contractor will have to pay if they fail to complete by the completion date. So once the works have been certified as practically complete, then of course the liability for liquidated damages stops. So this is why it's actually very important to know the definition of actual practical completion, or alternatively deemed practical completion. The final effect is that usually the risk of damage to the works usually transfers from the contractor to the employer, which makes sense, especially with deemed practical completion, because deemed practical completion occurs when possession is transferred from the contractor to the employer, and it naturally therefore follows that risk of damage to the works also transfers. So in summary, it's very important, the definition of practical completion, to understand when it's achieved. And although the works may not actually be practically complete because there may be defects that are not minor in nature, the works may still be deemed practically complete if the parties have entered into a JCT contract and the employer has taken possession and the contractor has consented to that possession. So if you have any queries in relation to practical completion, liquidated damages, patent and latent defects, or anything else in any of my previous vlogs, then please do not hesitate to contact me. My email address is brandonsilver@silverllp.com. Thank you for listening.
That's great. Thank you very much for that very clear and useful definition and information on practical completion. We look forward to seeing you again soon. Brandon, will you be answering another construction question?
I will do. Obviously, you've realised that this one has been a little bit delayed, but hopefully I will be able to get another one uploaded shortly.